Right, hello everyone. Once again, just welcome back to our channel, and I'm Stephen.
And I am Allie. Welcome everybody. And as you probably know already, we are the Mindset Junkies. I just want to take the time to say thank you if you are a returning subscriber. Thank you for sticking around and hearing what we have to say. And if you're new here, thank you so much for joining us. We generally talk about all things to do with mindfulness and well-being. And we aspire to provide information from our perspective, but more importantly, from both of our life experiences. Everything that we talk about, we look to give examples of, things that have happened in our lives and how we've learned from it and how we've adapted and grown from it. So we don't pretend to be perfect. We are far from it. And it's fair to say we haven't got it all totally mastered yet. And that's because we're all on our own personal journey. And, your own personal journey is an iterative process of self-development. In fact, I'm just about to fly off to the States in a few days' time to do more self-development with Tony Robbins, which I'm really looking forward to. But what we do try and do is we try and educate, entertain where we can, and most importantly, inspire you all to give you just some of the processes and techniques that Stephen and I use to pivot and shift our lives into the sort of existence that makes us feel whole and happy.
Yeah, and I think that example of kind of you flying off on more development activities is super important because, we need to do it in life, because if we don't do that, then we're just going to remain stagnant, aren't we? It's so critical and key to this topic today, actually, because today we're going to be talking about rejection and, you've got to go out and do those things to then learn to develop. But anyway, as Ali alluded to, we started this channel. It was as a way to kind of share information with you, share our experiences of basically what we've learned. And it was things that we've often learned the hard way, right? So where we've been through, we've got the cuts, we've got the bruises to basically show for what it is that we've tried. In this last 2 years, it has been particularly hard for everyone. Right. So we've had to learn new ways of doing things. We've had to learn to work remotely for many people. We've had to learn to spend a lot more time with our loved ones, with our children, than we probably ever anticipated that we would need to. For some, it's been an absolute blessing. For others, maybe not so much. We've had to learn new skills. We've had to learn new ways of learning. We've just had to do this rapidly as well. Like many of the companies and people that I work with, they weren't prepared for what we've been through in these last 2 years. And so this channel was kind of our way of basically helping people to find these new ways to thrive, to basically come through with a stronger mindset, to be armed with some of the strategies and patterns that Ali and I, and also our guest speakers, you will notice there's one on the line here, we'll introduce in a moment, that would basically help us through in different areas of our life. So, we wouldn't normally start our episodes with this opening statement, but as I've said, we've got a special guest here. So we thought we'd kind of do this little briefing just to kind of tee up for her to come in and do a bit of an introduction. So, this topic, it's focusing on rejection. And this is probably one of the most difficult experiences that we can associate with. And the reason is because it has the potential to muster up a whole series of emotions that we essentially need to accept, we need to adapt towards, we need to recover from. So we're going to dive right in and we're going to explore this rejection. So we've brought in Janette because this was a topic that between Ali and I, we felt as though we really couldn't do this justice. And Janette, we all met Janette through basically some of the communities that Ali and I have been involved in, some of the Tony Robbins groups, and some of the stories that Janette has. I think these are really good experiences for us to draw upon. So, for a quick introduction, Janette, can you just give a quick introduction of a few minutes, please, to our audience?
Sure. So, as Stephen said, my name is Janette, and I'm actually a thriller writer, and I actually avoided rejection at the beginning by self-publishing and selling, but there's a kind of different self-rejection in that process, in that you kind of don't have the validation that you kind of want because you haven't been picked. But and that's kind of a bigger subject altogether, and kind of set on the mindset of you as an individual. But more recently, what that did, that pushed me forward to actually write my second book, which I felt was so much better already. But then I started pushing myself further and actually going out to agents. But what that has done is actually come back with certain rejections, and like you kind of get the first one, and I'll be honest, I think I'm on my 8th rejection now. But at the same time, as it's been quite a tough process, especially as the numbers went on, but it's actually given me more hope because of the feedback. But that's kind of like the quick wrap up of the journey so far. And as I mentioned just before we went live, was that I'm kind of on a break right now as I'm intuitively letting the feedback develop into something much bigger. But as we go through our talk today, I'll be able to expand more on how I got through that and what's helped me deal with rejection along the way.
Oh, thank you so much for that, Janette. It's so great to have you with us for this particular discussion, and I don't think we could have hoped for anyone sort of more qualified, only because of your current process of, getting your novel launched and the iterative process of dealing with the rejection that you've already alluded to. And this is quite a tough subject. And, when I was thinking about this, I did actually get quite upset when I was going through the process of thinking about, what we wanted to talk about this evening. And we've all suffered from rejection at least once in our lives. And that heart-stopping moment that stops you in your tracks, and it's like a stinging slap in the face, immediately flooding your senses with embarrassment, shame, self-doubt. I mean, the list does go on. We've all been there, so we can all come up with all the emotions and feelings that we've felt. I mean, who here amongst us hasn't suffered from the rejection fallout, as I call it? It literally is the pits. Or is it, could it actually be the best thing that could ever happen to you? So we're going to spend a little bit of time this evening talking a little bit about some of our experiences and how you can learn and bounce back from rejection and actually start using it to your advantage. Is rejection just the outcome, or can we make it part of the process? So, Janette, you clearly have made rejection a big part of the process. So maybe do you want to tell us just a little bit more about how you've actually done that, and how did you get your head and your heart into that place that allowed you to actually embrace rejection rather than reject the rejection?
Yeah, and for me, it was really about aligning my energy with the outcome. It was basically, I had to become the person that is accepted by an agent, and I had to trust the process and have faith that by aligning and doing everything that I need to do to create it, because as you know, Allie, it's not just about being a author the best-selling thriller book. It's about creating getting movie rights and being part of something bigger, selling my message. Selling is probably the wrong word, but sharing my message through media, through entertainment, feels quite a positive way for me. So I had to align with that. I had to say, right, okay, what does this person who is able to create, who is able to write and be in that industry, who are they? Who do they have to be to do that? Who gets accepted? And really and truly, we are so lucky that there is so many people that already are doing what we're trying to achieve. So like for me, and admittedly, there's a lot more male dominated the industry I'm trying to get, it's a very much male dominated, but as we can start seeing the likes of Reese Witherspoon, who is bringing in female writers and turning books into movies or series, like Big Little Lies. So it was kind of like, how did they feel? What emotions did they tap into? What do I need to be to become that person and have faith? And it was really about, when I started applying, it was really about becoming that person. And then when the rejection started coming through, it's right, okay, what did that person that wrote Big Little Lies, I can't remember her name, Leon, I can't think of her name right now, I should have wrote it down, but like, what was she thinking at the time she got her first rejection, then her second rejection, and how did she move forward? Because she clearly pushed forward and became part of Reese Witherspoon's production company and her big Sunshine company. So it was really about aligning with that person that has already achieved what I want to achieve.
I love that.
It is. It's a great approach, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? It's an amazing concept when you think about it. And I imagine, as well, as an author and someone who writes books, and you create characters, you birth these characters, and you literally have to put yourself into that character in terms of their thought process and their thinking and their mannerisms and their body language. And you essentially are creating this person from nowhere, but essentially that person is actually inside of you already. And
such a healing process.
So you could actually be a closet serial killer. Is that what we're saying?
No, not at all. It's basically the thoughts that kind of happen in those scenarios. And it is actually a really healing process. I would say I've overcome a lot just by being able to tap into those characters. So really and truly, if you think about it, just by me saying, like, what did the Big Little Lies writer, what was she thinking, what was she feeling? I'm tapping into somebody else's, or my version, or my thoughts of that somebody else's persona. So I'm always creating that. So that, I think you briefly mentioned Tony Robbins earlier. He talks about everything we need is within us. That absolutely everything we need is within us. And I truly believe that. I believe that we are all one, and it's just us creating a vibrational energy of a match. So it's, as soon as that happens, then straight away we've got it. But sometimes it's just taking that step a little bit further to actually get there, to actually reach that pinnacle moment when you're actually says, I've done it, I've achieved it.
I think there's so many examples. Like, there's examples coming up in my mind with this. Like, I remember last year's hit show, Squid Games. 12 years it took and endless rejections to get that. And now that is a hit. Well, was a hit. And I think it was the same for Game of Thrones, definitely the same for Harry Potter. You know, some of the biggest series. And, you know, one thing that really struck me that you mentioned there was that, yeah, the book is one thing, but what you're actually targeting is the film, the movie rights. It's like, you know, the book is the step to get there, to the bigger piece. And it's fascinating, that thinking with it.
Yeah. And it is really interesting. It's because I think there's life patterns, isn't there? And I think for me, how it developed was purely out of the very first book I got back into when I became an adult was, I was going on holiday for my wedding, and I picked up a book that I knew was going to come into the cinema, which was The Beach. So I'd stopped reading because I was got tied up with work, and you kind of, adult life got involved, and I sort of pushed it aside. But that made me then, that kind of led me on this path that I believe is that just reading a book, then watching the movie, and then having a view on that movie based on what I'd read was kind of that moment. I want that kind of discussion to start opening up. I want people to interpret the book, then interpret the movie. It gets people talking and actually starting to really feel and know what it is what you're truly thinking.
Yeah. So in a way then, have you kind of been able to switch rejection, which is the opposite of feeling accepted, into something that you already have learned to accept as part of your day-to-day person, and you've made yourself that person that sees rejection as something that's actually a good thing.
Absolutely, because there is things that I would say actually does for you is that rejection is never really personal. It's a vibrational energy. It's an energy match. We are vibrationally communicating all of the time. So if that timing's not right, I don't want to be matched with someone that I'm not going to work with. If our relationship's not going to work, I don't want to be working with them anyway. And the other thing is actually truly having the ability to go, this isn't the end. Like there's almost a courage in that makes you proud, just to be able to move forward and say, okay, this isn't the end. And feedback, you do have to sometimes read between the lines, and then you've got to think about your own feedback. Like, okay, what am I thinking right now? What could I do better in this book? And it's really asking the right questions as well. So just by being rejected, it's sort of gone, actually, I can make this book better. And I messaged you, Allie, that when I thought about it, it was like, oh my God, I can make this book so much better by aligning. Because there was one thing that happened was I was pitching something, my pitch was getting seen. My pitch was getting my first 3 chapters read. But what was happening was the first 3 chapters wasn't selling it. So it was like I had to change the first 3 chapters. But then it was, hold on, there's actually something better I can do here. And all of a sudden, I had this vision of these 5 women that are main women in the story. Actually, it's always if I do it from their perspective all the time, from these 5 women, that tells the story in a different way. It's the same story, but it's told in a different way. And that's what's developing right now, which is actually better than the original story. So it's like, I needed that rejection. I needed to have that. My vibrational energy didn't match because I hadn't quite reached the message that I was trying to deliver.
Yeah. And I think as well that, being very in touch with your environment and what's going on in the world and what, like you say, what vibe is going on in society at that time can actually give your idea or your novel or whatever it is that you're trying to land with someone. It's being able to tap into that kind of energy and that kind of vibe that's going on at the moment that seems to have captured a lot of people's interest. That's the time to sort of think, this is the right time for my idea or for my novel or for whatever it is that you're putting yourself into, whether it's, a new job or whatever it might be. What is happening around you is almost like your litmus test. It's almost like your triggers, your pointers to sort of say, now is the right time. 6 months ago, it actually wasn't, which is why it didn't land, because it just wasn't the right time. There's a vibe that goes on around you that says, now is the time. I'm right. This is the right time for it to be accepted more widely. And that's a lesson that I've learned, even just being in the office today, pitching something to someone that I pitched sort of like 5 years ago. And everybody said, yeah, that's exactly what we need to do. And then also, why wasn't it picked up? Because it wasn't the right time. All of the right people weren't all in alignment or in their positions to be able to have that, that brain span, I suppose, in a way to sort of say, this now all aligns. We now all collectively as a hive now understand the importance of this. And I've stopped worrying so much about things not necessarily landing at that moment in time with those particular people, because it just wasn't the right time. It doesn't mean that the idea is wrong. It just means that they're not the right people are there to are actually able to make that decision. And what's happening in the business or what's happening around you in your relationship, it's just not the right time. And it's never something that you should take, you should never sort of get to the point where you actually feel that it's a personal thing. It's impossible to avoid. And life doesn't always grant us with that acceptance, but it's just you really being true to what your idea is or what your novel is or whatever, and actually finding the right time, the right moment, whether it's yourself or external forces, to actually make it all land. And as you said, Stephen, that's happened with, J.K. Rowling, it's happened with Elon Musk, it's happened with a lot of people in our peripheral vision who have all been successful. It's taken a lot of perseverance to get it landing at the right time with the right people.
And there's something that you mentioned as well, Janette, that I've really liked. And you said that you basically give it out the first few chapters, and then you found that it wasn't resonating. And I think that's a key approach to this, isn't it? That it's quite easy to just go, okay, that person said no, so that's it. I'm going to go and give up. And quite frankly, that's what the vast majority of people will do. But the thing is, what this is saying is that you're taking this kind of data-oriented approach, that you're looking for that feedback, you're looking for the data. Like in my work when I first started with Salesforce, this is the role that I was brought in to explore and do. It was about how can we change the ethos of how business works by having them experiment. So we're promoting this ethos of rejection. Like, we know that, say, 9 out of 10 of the ideas that customers run with are going to fall flat, but that one idea is going to be a massive, massive success. But the thing is, the other 9 ideas, the idea is that it's low touch effort. It's a fraction of what it would cost for a normal project to be executed. You're just testing things, testing the waters. So I'm interested in your view on that. Like, from your side, over time, have you got better at this kind of like experimentation-led approach? Like, how have things changed from when you first started to now?
I must admit, one of the things that I would pride myself on, and I identify with, is my adaptability. Is that I've, in fact, to be honest, I've probably calmed down a bit since being married, which is now 22 years. But before we got married, I was like literally just jump in, do it, jump in, try it, jump in, try it. So I've kind of, over the period of my life, is just I've tried and found. And actually I hadn't remembered that until you just mentioned that. But it's something that I think I've just, because I was kind of like sit on my pants, kind of just try things and do it. And like some people used to say to me, you're just jump in without even thinking. They'd say that to me, you jump in without even thinking, because I used to be someone that would just try and not plan. But what I've developed is that, and I didn't like feedback though, so I would give up. So I jump in, foul, give up, jump in, foul, give up. So that rejection was something that, thick skin comes to mind, like I kind of gained a thick skin over that. But now that I'm really taking life seriously and taking it to that next level and doing all the self-development work, I've really come to realise it's about knowing the outcome, and just once you know what the outcome is, it's just being able to make that adjustment and hear the feedback. It doesn't, sometimes we have to be careful of the way the feedback is coming back to us, because it can either sound like an attack, it can sometimes sound like it can come in the form of jealousy. So we have to really take the feedback in a way that resonates to us. And that's how I've developed that not thicker skin, I've probably got a softer skin now, but developed that skill of just taking data and receiving that information.
So important. And in my mindfulness teachings, this is a real strong concept that we talk about. Of, when you talk about some of the experiences, you shouldn't talk about like I am. It should be things like I feel. So then if you're rejected for a specific reason, you may have a tendency to go, I am sad. I am unhappy, I am frustrated. But the thing is, what that does, that creates the condition in our mind, isn't it? That we actually are that thing. Whereas if we say we feel, it's an emotion. Emotions comes and goes, just as thoughts do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And that, depending what kind of person you are, sometimes it's I hear, I see, I feel, and like, so it's like, or if you're sort of like, there is a fourth one, but I can't think what that is right now. But it's kind of like, if you're that type of person that envisions things, I actually flip between all three. Like sometimes it's about, I'm probably less here because I'm not an overly good listener, I know I've said I then, but I'm not, but I didn't say I am, but yeah, it's kind of like developing that identity that you want to create, really. And it is like, it took me ages to identify as a writer, because I don't know if I've ever shared this with you guys before, but because grammar and spelling was a really difficult thing for me, and it's something that I really didn't develop very well at school, I identified as someone that struggled to write. So I would always say, I struggle to write, I can't write. But coming through that, we are lucky today, we have tools like Grammarly, and also got to remember that there's editors available as well. So it was really overcoming that and identifying as a writer and an author, and regardless of whether it was self-published or not, it's still a published book that went out. So it was kind of just getting through that step was quite tough. But once I was able to identify it, so it's not only do we need to identify our strengths, we need to identify our weaknesses so we can overcome them.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I mean, you used a perfect phrase there a moment ago about, look at rejection as a stepping stone. And that, when you do, you realise that some of those difficult experiences actually helped and leaded you on to other successes in your life. I have had lots of rejection in my life, but I've always taken something from it and learned from it, and then gone into a sort of similar situation, being able to recognise some of the red flags that might be external, but also some of the internal red flags to myself. Am I starting to repeat some of the, the actions or habits or language that I'm using that I can already say, alarm's just gone off. There is a déjà vu moment happening here within myself that I know is probably not going to help me in this situation. And again, I think as well that we all want to be accepted, and when we get rejected, I think that's why it stings so much, because in a primal way we all want to feel that we're part of a tribe or part of a group that are all accepted in some way. And then when you become rejected in some way, that you feel rejected from that group, because this is where the embarrassment, the shame, the guilt, all these different emotions come on, and they're just piling right on top of each other. And you've come up with some absolutely wonderful words of wisdom there about how to, look at yourself and create the person who can actually deal with rejection much more. Because, let's face it, we're never ever going to live for the rest of our lives without having some form of rejection in our lives. There's just no way. So this is something that is really important to try and master, to the point that it doesn't sting quite as much, change the focus, change the lens on it, to actually say, okay, what can I learn from this about myself, but what can I learn about the external factors around me that I can't necessarily change, I have no influence on, but recognize that it is a moment in time, it is a person in time. And at this moment, this thing about either me or a project or a novel or an idea, it's just not landing because it's just not the right thing at the right time, and not to take it personally.
And I may have made this up, but I just wonder, I'm sure that I've come across as a quote before, or maybe it's going to be my quote now, that if you're not being rejected, then you're not trying hard enough. Quite frankly, you've got to put yourself out there, you've got to fail and fall over a few times. Absolutely. It's like, Ali, we've mentioned many times before about the kind of children and things like walking. It's like the first time they fall over flat on the face, they don't just suddenly stop and go, I'm never going to be able to walk, I'm just going to give up and just never bother. Yeah. Same with riding a bike.
And we celebrate the fact that they're trying.
Yeah.
You know, we never use, oh, you failed at that. Look at you. Oh, well, we'll just leave you on the floor and we're not going to encourage you to get up and walk. No, we celebrate every small step that they take.
Yeah.
So, you know, rejection and failure, they kind of go hand in hand, don't they, in some way, shape or form?
Yeah.
And, you know, as you said that, Allie, what came to mind was that the community that we've the three of us have met on in is a community that's actually allowed me to say, I've done this but failed, and yet still celebrated like that child that took their first step, because everyone has said, like, you've put yourself out there, how amazing. Like, I want to be that brave. And I do believe that part of us, the biggest part of us, just wants to inspire others. Yeah. We're all connected. And you mentioned, Ali, about feeling like we need to, like we don't want to be on the outside, we want to be connected. And that is part of, and I do feel lucky that as part of my own spiritual journey, I can feel that connection. And I've actually, and I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but there was this particular day that, do you know, that feeling when one day you're actually, the day when you've got this dream and you're suddenly accepted into something and it feels amazing, like it's the best day of your life, whether that's getting married, like being accepted on a proposal or being proposed to, or you're kind of being accepted in that moment. And this was like that. And it's basically, I felt my agent. It was like I'd had that phone call. I just received that phone call and they said, like, we want in and we've got a publisher lined up. So it was like they already had the process going. And it was like I was walking like on like a cloud nine. It was total fuel. I can't even say the word because tongue-tied. Thank you very much. But it was like that. It was like I'd been accepted. So it's almost like that connection's already happened. So now I've just got to have faith. I've got to believe it and just know that it is going to happen. It's just, like you said, Ali, timing is not right now.
Yeah, it's actually such a strong skill to be able to visualize the moment when, you know, your dream or your passion suddenly gets, you know, that verification gets validated, it gets that acceptance that you're looking for. And when you're able to put yourself in that moment and you feel all the emotions that rush through you, and, you know, you're hearing things, you're smelling things, you really get into that absolute moment. You know, what tingles do you feel going through through your skin? What, you know, where do you feel this emotion? Is it in your head? Is it in your heart? Is it in your stomach? Is it somewhere else? That you really start to almost manifest that thing happening for you because you imagine it with such clarity that you're almost actually in that moment, and it makes your idea or your passion or your want or your need for this thing to land much more. You feel it an awful lot more. You actually really feel it deep down inside, and the picture just becomes really, really, really clear. And you know, we want to talk a little bit about some of the steps that we think would be really helpful for people to adapt and adopt into their everyday lives, because, like we said, rejection is never, ever going to go away. And, you know, obviously that visualization about that moment is a really, really strong way to feel very, very wedded to it. So, Stephen, do you want to start taking us through some of the pointers that we've got to share with people around how they can, you know, really start looking at rejection as a chance to, you know, regroup and focus, first of all?
Yeah, of course. So basically, the first step is just as you say there, Ali, that, and just as we've heard from this session here with Janette and reflections from me and Ali here, that, you know, rejection, it should be treated as a chance to regroup and refocus on what really, really matters. So when you've got your heart set on something, just as Janette has done, you know, visualizing what that end game looks like. You know, being rejected, it might seem like it's an absolute bummer, but the reality is that it's a step in the process. And that, just as Janette alluded to, is it's like it's not meant to be within that specific instance. So just have a think about that the next time you do get knocked back, and just regroup, refocus, think about what other things, what other alternatives it is you may want to do, but keep that big picture in mind and completely don't give up. You know, after all, we have to think it's all about perception. So if you are willing to look, you can basically know that in every crisis, there actually lies an opportunity. And by refocusing, it doesn't mean that you're basically changing yourself according to someone else's standards. It's basically you just realigning and just thinking, do I need to do things maybe just a little tiny bit differently, just as Janette mentioned with her 3 chapters and the focus on the women as opposed to other things. So, you know, prime example. So the second one is then about seeing rejection as a way of getting onto the right track. Okay. So rejection happens when you try for something and it simply doesn't work out. It's that experimentation analogy that I basically brought to the table a moment ago that we all kind of agreed was kind of a key part of essentially life. You know, and this can be anything. So it could be like kind of learning and kind of getting back onto the right track following a failed relationship. It could be being let down from a job to basically something like an ignored email. And I've got a funny example here. So when I was graduating from university, placement years were the big thing to go for. So you went for a year in industry. And I remember I created a spreadsheet that ended up having about 100 different companies in it. Now, what I'd do, I'd have my standard CV with my standard cover letter that I would then go and change the name of the company at the top. I would just change a little tiny bit of detail, and then I would fire it off. And I'd note down on my spreadsheet when I'd sent all these things off, and then I could note down when I got responded. And you can probably guess at how many actually came back to me. And I think it was probably like 1 or 2 or something like that out of that like 100 or so companies. And you know, that's an example of seeing a rejection of getting on the right track, because what I learned for next time is that, you know, I'm in competition with all these other people. So what do I need to do differently to differentiate myself? You need to just try, maybe think something a little bit differently, and then kind of go again, because, you know, we all realize rejection absolutely sucks, but it's about how we then go react and actually recorrect what it is that we're actually doing to get back onto that right track. Okay. One thing for sure with this is, and this kind of goes for everything to do with rejection, is that self-care is truly important. So we was actually reflecting before this session, before we actually started recording this, and we were talking about us valuing ourselves, and we was talking about how essentially self-awareness and intuition is a key part of this process. It's a key part of rejection, because if we know what our true worth is, then regardless if someone comes in and turns us down for whatever reason, whatever it may be, it could be a job, it could be a relationship, whatever, we still can hold our head up high and saying, I actually still value myself, and that's okay. I'm going to go again and keep on trying. Now, with the self-care, you know, just naturally keeping on top of things like making sure that we're exercising, that we're just keeping our body and our mind physically and mentally strong. Because in that way, you know, it's like that same thing that if I sit down, if I'm like this and I'm kind of talking with my arms crossed, then I don't really kind of breathe any kind of positivity. But if I'm open and engaging, then it just sounds, you know, much more powerful. So, you know, keep our body, keep our minds open. So I know self-care was kind of a key one for you, Allie. So do you have any kind of tips from your perspective as to what you have done, or anything kind of in rejection there?
Yeah, I mean, I had a rejection that it hit me quite hard a couple of months ago, and I let it play around in my head, and it was really bringing me down. And you know, as I often do, I tried to keep my peak state up, and I would do it, and then this thought would come into my head again about a rejection, and it would be all that, you know, I should have done this, I should have said that, if only I'd, you know, done this differently or whatever. And I let this bubble around inside me, And then I realized that I was just trying to go through the motions of just trying to carry on, but it wasn't working. If anything, it was pulling me down. So I took a time out. I just took a few days out, and I thought, I'm actually just going to take some time out for myself. And that's what I did. I switched off my laptop. I switched off my phone. I didn't go on any social media. And I literally just got outside. And I just spent some time with people that mean a lot to me. I did some exercise. I indulged a little bit in some of the food or drink that I particularly like. But I actually just sort of served the things that made me happy. I baked lots of cakes, and I went for a jog around the lake, and I just did small incremental things that just fed my soul and made me feel happier. And it worked because it almost like triggered something in me that sort of says, right, okay, now look at this from a happy place. How can you look at the rejection that you're going through when you're feeling low, like you say, you feel, sort of hunched over, and I wasn't opening any of myself up to looking at this from a happy perspective. So once I got myself into a happier sort of place, I was then able to actually look at what had happened and how I dealt with it and how I could learn from it. And it just sort of like totally topped up my energy and my motivation levels again. And I started to journal. I looked a little bit more about, what is it that I've got to offer here? Don't lose faith in who I am, being very self-aware, concentrated very much on my strengths, not so much on my weaknesses. Just really built myself back up again and actually re-engaged myself and introduced myself to myself again. And it was amazing. It was almost like sitting in a Formula One car and put my foot on the accelerator. I went from that standing stop to 180 miles an hour, just like that. And I don't go back and think about the rejection from the rejection perspective anymore. I look at it from the point of view that I've learned some things out of it, and I've recognized things of myself, but things that were external to me that were out of my circle of influence. So I can only influence the things that are personal to me. And that's where I decided to put my focus.
Sounds like a very powerful way to handle this from a self-care side.
It worked. It worked for me. It's not going to work for everybody. It does need some practice. But it's great to have people around you, like, yourself, Janette, and yourself, Stephen, who actually always help to build me up as well. So having your right tribe around you and being very aware of your environment as well. And it can just be one phrase that someone says to you that just resonates, and you think, yeah, that's it. I'm wallowing in self-doubt and self-pity here. Time to lift myself out of it.
Yeah. And it could be, say, a phrase, could be a music track. Another idea of an exercise here as well. So naturally the self-care route, I advocate that too. I enjoy the running, I enjoy the meditation, music, fantastic, it helps me too. But there's actually an exercise. So Allie, I have worked with you before to do some journaling. And there's one exercise here where you can do exactly that. And it's just at any point in time, just write down all of the emotions that you are feeling, and then just pair them with the thoughts that are going on within your mind at that time relating to those emotions. And, just by doing this, we're beginning to create some distance between our thoughts, our feelings, our emotions. And it just helps us kind of cope with any potential rejection a lot better, because what we're beginning to do is actually name it and call it out, as opposed to it just being a thing that is up here that we don't probably quite understand.
I love that. I called my rejection my boo-boo.
Definitely some more stronger, more negative names than it could be.
I've had some choice words for other things as well, but this particular one was my boo-boo.
So the third one is then just recognizing that regardless of the outcomes, you are still putting yourself out there, and that's always good. So just as I mentioned, in whether it's my quote or whether it's somebody else, right? If you're not being rejected, then you're not trying. You're not trying hard enough. And, rejection becomes easier the more that you experience it. So continuously running into it, it's like that muscle, it's just exercising. It's like going to the gym, constantly flexing, just recognizing that, I'm just going to keep on trying. I'm going to keep on trying. I'm going to get up. I'm going to dust myself off. I'm going to go again. Every time that you rise, it's just recognizing that you're coming out just that tiny little bit stronger. So just think of it like you're going to the gym, you're practicing. And as Ali said, you're learning something as well as you go along with this too. The end result is that essentially you have something to flex about, just as Janette is going to experience, right? So as soon as that book gets published, as soon as that becomes the film, there's the flex, and that's become because there's been that repetition throughout. It's likened to kind of going to the gym, building that muscle. As I mentioned, getting rejected basically means that you are trying something new. You are trying something to achieve your vision, to basically change your life. It might take a few tries beforehand, but, something will eventually work. So, Janette, I know we've spoke about this throughout this session, but do you have any kind of words of wisdom around this, or any kind of extensions of what you spoke about?
The biggest thing for me is just know your outcome. Because if you know what you want and then align with it, and you only have to take 5-minute action each day, you don't even have to make it a big thing. And then once you know what your outcome is, just let go. Let go of it. You know where you're driving to, you know where you're going. If you're stuck in traffic, enjoy that moment where you get to listen to the radio. Like where you get to listen to, in my case, like I'm using a car as an example. We've set the destination on the sat nav. The sat nav's taking me. I can have faith that it's going to get me to where I want to go. But if I get stuck in traffic, that's fine. It's just, or there's a diversion, that's fine because I get to see a new view. So it's kind of just, in terms of that, is just really connecting with yourself and knowing that the fact that you know where you want to go. And I don't believe that we are put on this earth to come up with an idea for no reason at all. I believe our ideas are part of who we are and why we're here on this earth to actually create. So have faith that that is meant to be. No one is unworthy. So it's just believing that. And I can assure you I've been quite a journey to believe that in myself, as being worthy enough for the results that I'm experiencing and the happiness that I feel, the lightness and the freedom. So just because from the external world it looks like nothing is happening, we're creating foundations.
Love it. Love that. It's like the pyramid of the pedestal, isn't it? Of, we might see the success of the first, second, and third place on the pedestal, but all of the hard work, the effort, the sweat, the tears, the fear, the rejection, everything that sits underneath that is invisible.
Yeah.
And that's character building. Definitely.
Yeah.
So the fourth one is about remembering that occasional letdowns, they give us a good reason to basically celebrate even harder, to make them that much sweeter. So it's not uncommon for a bout of rejection to really harvest a jumble of unhappy feelings and experiences. But, once everything does work out, which it will do, the good would just basically become the ordinary. And there wouldn't be anything to celebrate or savor otherwise, right? So let's not forget that the most successful people have experienced the most failures. We mentioned J.K. Rowling in this. We also mentioned the Squid Games. 12 years. I think he had to sell his laptop actually in the process for Squid Games. The laptop they used to actually put the idea forward for the series. So, it's crazy to think what they went through to get to the stage where they've now got kind of really, really big hits, like Steve Jobs being fired by Apple before being asked to come back years later and actually transform the company. Each one has kind of taken it in the stride and just kind of moved forward and just basically, smashed it in the end. So every single no will make that one yes much more meaningful. Without a string of rejections, we basically fail to see what the real value is in what the ultimate goal is that that we're going for. Just think, if every single thing was handed on a plate to us, and it was like every idea that we had was like, oh yeah, that's awesome, here you go, here's success on a plate, it wouldn't be meaningful, would it? And it's because literally everybody would have it. It'd be like, oh yeah, I'm going to write a book, and yeah, great, it's bestseller, just like that. It's like it would make it a lot less meaningful towards us. Yeah. So one thing for sure is that rejection, it basically happens to absolutely everybody. We've thrown in some examples there with J.K. Rowling, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, so on. They've all had rejection in their life. So have you, so has Janette, so has Allie, so has I, so has literally everybody in the world. It's just basically how we choose to view it and essentially go ahead and respond to it that really, really matters. So just look for the lessons in the experience, and just remember that sometimes it's not meant to be, and just find a different angle.
I recently watched an interview with Jami Kern, Lima, who is the creator of It Cosmetics. And she talked a lot about her rejection experiences while she was trying to get her cosmetic range launched. And she used to be a TV anchor. So she was used to being in front of the camera. She was used to, having makeup plastered all over her face. She was used to having an awful lot of people sort of criticize how she looked, or how bad she looked on some days. And she decided when she got out of the TV business, she wanted to follow her passion to create a cosmetic range that would actually cover up her really, really bad rosacea. But because she had all this makeup on her face all the time in front of the TV cameras, not many people knew that she actually had rosacea. So when she went through this process of creating a cosmetic range, she literally had doors slammed quite hurtfully in her face, along with a lot of personal comments about her looks and her body shape. People that she was going to for funding or to help her to get on the ladder towards her final vision were really quite cruel about, no one will ever want to, buy cosmetics from you because of the way that she looked. I mean, and she's absolutely gorgeous, but she has a very, very, unique kind of look about her. But the problem was that, as a news anchor, a lot of her rejections were getting played out in the public arena. And but she made lots of, she was persevered. She made lots of adjustments, and she finally actually got a 10-minute slot on QVC channel, where you literally have to sell all your products out within that 10-minute slot, or else that's it, you don't get invited back. And she had realized that she was actually showing her cosmetics already on women that were already made up. But the whole sort of USP of this was the fact that it covered up really, really bad rosacea. So what did she do? On camera, she took all her makeup off so people could actually see the quality of the skin that she had. And then she put the makeup back on. And in that 10-minute segment, all of her products sold out. And that's really where she got her break. And from there, things just got better and better. And she recently sold her business for over $1 billion. She started with 5,000. So, rejection can be both the pain and the pleasure, because she obviously learned a lot from, that painful experience of the constant rejection that got her to the point where she said, my USP is something that I'm not advertising. I've got to strip this face right back, show people what the skin is like, and then put the makeup on so they can actually see the quality of the coverage that it gives. So, she's definitely a woman that I look up to for inspiration. And I'm sure lots of people who are going to be watching this will know who Jami Kern Lima is. But if you don't, definitely go and look her up. There's lots of great interviews out there that you could hear her tell her story for herself, but she's got an amazing, story to share. Yeah. Janette, just before we finish off this evening, is there anything else that you want to add to the discussion that you think would be a lovely little pearl of wisdom to leave at this point?
Do you know what? I can't think of anything that we haven't already covered, but as I mentioned, it really is about knowing what you want, having faith, and just keep moving forward and Like Steve mentioned, your self-care, and the self-care comes in so many different shapes and forms, and it's just knowing what's right for you and work with that. You don't have to do what everyone else is doing, getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. If that doesn't work for you, then that's fine. So it's just really developing ways that really feels true to you. Me, I'm a meditator, love meditating. If I could meditate all day, fantastic. And yeah, and sometimes it's just, Ali, you mentioned about sitting with yourself as part of your self-care. For me, I actually have silence days where I let no information in, but all information out. So everything that's going on in here comes out, but nothing, no TV, no social media, no self-development. Everything that is in me right now to allow me to free myself up. So just do what's right for you.
I'll have to try those silence days with my 3-year-old. See if she lets that go.
Good luck with that.
I'd love that. Yeah, and before we finish, Janette, is there anything that our kind of growing audience can help you with at all? Is there anything you want to call out, or any kind of website to go to, social profile?
I haven't got anything right now. I'm in the process of developing I have got a Facebook under Janette Collins where I share my writing my book journey. But I'm also launching very, very shortly, hopefully by the end of June, is Being the I in Happiness. And that is going to be an online course where I share all my tools that actually are relevant to today, but that's in the future. But by all means, follow me on, I think it's Janette Collins Writer on Facebook. But perhaps when we share the video, I'll put a link in our comments when I share and I'll share as well. So to get
cool.
this message out.
Yeah, thank you.
And we definitely would like to, share the success that you will have when you actually get your books published. So please come back and talk to us about, when your book gets launched and how that's feeling and what the next stages and steps are for you. But Stephen and I would love to just say thank you very much for being our special guest this evening and being part of this emotive subject and really sharing quite openly your experiences and how you've managed to evolve and adapt and learn from those. There's no doubt about it. And I think we can all agree that rejection is here to stay in our lives. It's how we respond and manage it is what makes it part of the process that creates the outcome we want for ourselves. So we'd like to say thank you for watching and for joining us. Again, we'd love to invite you to subscribe, like and share this episode. Hit the bell for notifications so that you don't miss any of our up and coming episodes. I'm sure you will benefit. Even if there's just one little snippet that we give that is helpful, then our job will be done. So we'd just like to say thank you again, Janette, and we really look forward to talking to you all again in the next episode.
Yeah, thank you, and just remember that give it 10 years or so when the thriller is on Netflix. That this was the first one. This is the exclusive.
This was it. And just a little snippet on that. I used to go to school with Stephen Moffat, who went on to write the new Sherlock Holmes series and Doctor Who. So I sat next to him in typing class, and look where he is now. So there you go.
So yeah, good to have you.
Anyway, thanks everybody. It's so great to see you again. Thank you, Janette. It's been so lovely to see you.
Thank you for having me.